So I want to give you guys kind of a peek into some of the things that I do as a consultant to record labels. I really see a lot of upside. I really see a lot of positivity. Those of you who followed me for a long time, you know that I don't do a lot of complaining about where we're at. I'm more solution oriented, and I'm more interested about how you can use the things that are happening now to your advantage as a musician, as a career artist, rather than sitting around and whining and puling about them and complaining and moaning and bitching. I think that's time not well spent. Things aren't the way they used to be anymore in the record industry. The record business understands that they can't manipulate every single little detail anymore. And so a lot of leeway is given to artists to hang themselves. It's really different now. It's really different. And from a DIY aspect, from a DIY perspective, which is probably where most of you are, where you're at with that in the DIY area is you actually have it even better because you don't have anybody that you're beholden to. The flip side of that, the con of that pro, is that you also don't have the money and the machine behind you, the engine that drives distribution. So you've got to do all of that yourself. You have to do all of your own promotion. You have to do all of your own asking. You have to do all of your own radio stuff, plugging your songs, getting your songs with bloggers, getting your songs with different radio shows, internet radio shows, getting your songs to be played on Pandora, getting them to be played on Spotify, getting on playlists on Spotify, doing all the things that we do as DIY artists to gain recognition and gain awareness and spread awareness about our stuff. It takes a lot of work, takes a lot of ambition, takes a lot of really hardcore never say die, never give up attitude. It's not impossible. It's hard, but it's not impossible. So I want to show you a couple of different things. This is something that I've used in the past with colleagues when I'm at record labels, when we're all sitting around conference tables and we're talking about artists and we're talking about artist development and A&R and all that kind of stuff. It's very sobering. It's very eye-opening. So let's check this out. So these are basically the 5 stages of artistry we have currently right now in the music industry. If you were to take a snapshot right now of where we're at in music, these 5 stages cover every artist out there, okay? Now obviously on the end you have undiscovered. That's pretty self-explanatory. That's somebody who's making music and nobody knows it, right? I mean, nobody knows it. Nobody knows that you're in your bedroom toiling away. Nobody knows that you're playing around town. And you could be doing a lot of stuff. You could be doing a lot of things. And understand that this whole thing, this whole graph that I'm about to go into, all these metrics that I'm about to go into for you, have to do with awareness. They have nothing to do with sales. They have nothing to do with, how much money you're making necessarily from your music. I'm talking about awareness. I want to make that really super clear because it's going to play in to everything that we talk about from here on out. Now, a promising artist is somebody who people do know about. People know that you're out and about. People know that you're trying. You haven't reached established stage yet, but you're not undiscovered. Now, an established artist is somebody who is, regionally sound. You're probably at the top of your genre regionally. You might have some acclaim in other parts of the world, maybe geographical locations around the world that are specific to the thing that you do. I fall into this category. So I have no regional awareness in my home region, which is the United States. I bet you if I had a way to drill down into the data, the albums that I have sold in the States have been to friends and family. But I have a solid following in Japan. I could play a show in Japan tomorrow and I could probably do pretty well. Not an arena show, but a small theater or something like that, or an amphitheater. I could do something in South Africa tomorrow and I would do pretty well. I could do something in France tomorrow and I would do pretty well. So those are my 3 main regional hubs of activity that are mainly, aware of who I am. So that's an established artist, okay? Now, a mainstream artist is somebody who has name brand recognition. So let me give an example. Joe Bonamassa. Now, your average music listener wouldn't know who the hell you're talking about. But if you're any kind of a musician, if you've followed blues, if you've followed funk, if you've followed R&B over the course of the last 30 years, You totally know who Joe Bonamassa is. So he's an established artist, but he's not in the mainstream. Snarky Puppy, another example of an established act, okay? They're not mainstream, right? Their fan base is very, very pointed. It's very purposed. If you're a fan of Snarky Puppy, you're a certain kind of person. But going mainstream, a mainstream artist would be an example of somebody like Christina Perri. She's not epic. She's not a household name. She's not oversaturated to the point of being on every billboard on Hollywood Boulevard. But she's beyond established. She's in the mainstream. She's had a lot of top 40 hits. She's got a very dedicated fan base. She falls into the pop category, which almost makes her mainstream to begin with. Carly Rae Jepsen would be another one. She'd be another mainstream artist. She's not epic in the way that a Taylor Swift is, or in the way that a Rihanna might be, okay? But she's mainstream. People know who she is. And if you walk into a room of 100 people and you say a mainstream artist's name, you'll know they're mainstream because 90% of the room knows who they are. They might not follow them. They might not listen to their stuff. They might not really care about them that much, but they know exactly who you're talking about. And then, like I said, an epic stage artist is somebody who is just ubiquitous. They're everywhere. They are leveraging every piece of everything they've got in a way that scales them to the point of ridiculousness. Taylor Swift, Katy Perry, Rihanna, Adele, Justin Timberlake, Bruce Springsteen. Now here's where it gets interesting. You know, you might raise an eyebrow and go, why did he say that? Well, because Bruce Springsteen, even though he hasn't done anything in a while, and he certainly hasn't had a hit for ages, his legacy catalog is so vast and so deep and so important to so many people. Did you know he's actually as popular with 18-year-olds right now as he is with 65-year-olds? That's pretty impressive. He just has a catalog that is deep and wide to the point where it's invaluable to him as an artist. He wouldn't have to do anything else for the rest of his career, and his back catalog will just earn and earn and earn and earn and earn because he's so beloved by so many people over the last 35 or 40, 45 years. So there's a couple of different ways that you can go with this, and that's what I want to illustrate as we move forward here. This is going to be really, really interesting for a lot of you who've never thought about this kind of stuff before. But the thing that I want you to think about with these 5 stages is, where are you? Okay? Now, a lot of you are going to fall into the undiscovered category because I just know who my audience is. I know who I'm talking to here. Some of you will follow into the promising category. Several of you will follow into the established category. Maybe even a few of you in mainstream, or maybe you've played with acts or you've been with people who were mainstream. And so you've kind of seen that forest from the trees, if you will. You've had sort of a bird's eye view of that stage. But very few of us have seen or felt what it's like to be an epic stage artist. That is a stratospheric phenomenon that only the very, very few ever attain and ever realize. And that's why I kind of throw Taylor Swift out there as sort of the ultimate epitome of an epic stage artist. She is leveraging every single metric of social that she has to push her brand, to expand her territory, to widen her awareness. And she's really good at it. Not to mention that her tunes are just memorable as hell and people love them, right? So let's go to a couple of these and let's look at some artists that fall into these categories. There's a couple of different things that you sort of have to pay attention to here. There's an alchemy that you want to try to achieve when you're promoting yourself online. There's an ideal balance between legacy catalog and solid social that you always want to try and achieve. Solid social meaning that your social platforms and the way that you market yourself online is very even. Everything is floating at about the same level. Your Facebook, your Twitter, your Vivo, your YouTube, your Pandora, your Spotify. You want to be certain, or as certain as you can, that you're consistent across all those platforms, that you don't have an Instagram account that's just in the toilet while your Facebook engagement is sky high. Not everybody is on all platforms. There are certain people who just love SoundCloud versus iTunes or Apple Music or Connect. They like the way it's laid out. They think it's easier to use. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it. You've got to be on all of them. You got to be on Musical.ly. You got to be on Snapchat. You got to be on, Twitter. You got to be on Facebook. You got to be everywhere. You got to be on all of them. You got to be on SoundCloud. You got to be everywhere. You lose market share every time you give up one of those platforms for laziness. I don't know how that thing works, man. I'm not on there. There's a hell of a lot of people on Google+. You're just not reaching any of them, so you wouldn't know. So you got to be careful that you don't write yourself out of awareness. And somebody that's an epic artist, they have control of all those things. And you'll see in a second what I'm talking about, okay? So we're going to start from the top, all right? I'm going to give you, let's just go with Taylor Swift. And I mean, look at these metrics. I mean, her Facebook is out of this world. Her Twitter is out of this world. Vivo's high. It's the smallest metric here, but it's still freaking outrageous. Instagram's up there, and her Pandora placement is crazy. You contrast that with somebody like Bruce Springsteen, who I mentioned earlier, and check this out. Totally different. Way lower. His Facebook is average. His YouTube is a little above average. His Instagram isn't even happening. He probably doesn't even have an account. His Twitter is a little above average. His Pandora is just licking the bottom side of high. What that means, but he's still an epic stage artist. Now, what does that mean? Taylor Swift's social is driving her catalog. And I want you to think about this. She's only released 5 albums. She's only been an artist for 10 years. And she's only released 5 albums. So she has a long way to go. So what does that mean? Well, her legacy catalog is not very big. 5 albums isn't that much. So her social is driving her catalog. But Bruce Springsteen is exactly the opposite. His catalog is so freaking huge, and it means so much to so many different people that he doesn't need to have social media. He doesn't need to be engaging online with people. He doesn't need to be, he doesn't need to be in the news with every model that he dates or every, time that he dumps a girlfriend like she is, he's a married guy. He's been married to Patti Scialfa forever. They got a family. He doesn't tour a lot. He doesn't really need to record because his legacy catalog speaks for itself. He's released 18 studio albums. She's released 5, right? He's been in the mainstream for 40 plus years. She's been in the mainstream for maybe 8 of the 10 that she's been an active artist. So these are really, really, really good comparisons between these two artists. You got Taylor on the social side, Bruce, not so much with social, but his legacy content, holy crap. He is a respected artist. He's somebody who has a lot of diehard fans. I mean, he's a legacy artist. We don't know if Taylor Swift is a legacy artist or not yet. She hasn't been around long enough to really, to really measure that. But she's well on her way. Love her or hate her, doesn't really matter. I'm not here to debate whether, she's good or not. I don't really care. I look at the metrics, I look at the data, I look at the numbers, and you just can't deny she's a star. And you can't deny that Bruce is a star. But they have very, very different metrics, and I just wanted to illustrate that for you so you can kind of see what's going on there. There's a big difference between being solid socially and having a huge legacy catalog where it really doesn't matter what you do socially. People just love your tunes, man. So let's go now to mainstream artist and see what the difference is between an epic stage artist and a mainstream artist, all right? So I'm gonna type in The Temper Trap. The Temper Trap is a great band, by the way, but fairly new. Regionally in their area, they were hot, and then they broke mainstream. But if you look at their metrics, their stuff is fairly below average, except for their Pandora plays. So obviously people are listening to their music, but what's driving it? Because they don't have legacy content. They've only released a couple of albums, and their social isn't that great. I mean, look at their Instagram. They don't even have an Instagram. I would be willing to bet they don't even have an Instagram account. Nobody from the band's organization has ever logged into Instagram. I mean, look at that. It's terrible. Facebook above average, Twitter below average, YouTube right at average, just slightly above. Here's the reason why their social sucks and their Pandora plays are so great. Temper Trap, and this has been in the news. They've talked about this in interviews a lot. They don't do social media. They have accounts, but they've made a conscious choice, a professional choice as a band, not to tweet, not to Facebook, not to communicate about anything they're doing until it's out. So there's large gaps between projects. They just basically go radio silent between, when they're recording or when they're on tour or, whatever. So they're head down in the studio and they're working and it's business time. And so they don't do a lot of social. Now, check out my friend Lorena McKennett. Lorena McKennett is a world music artist, kind of bordering on the new age category a little bit. Some people think of her as a new age artist, although she's much, much deeper and much, much more versatile than that. Her situation is relatively similar. High Pandora plays, above average Facebook, non-existent Twitter, non-existent Instagram, and below average YouTube. All right. Now, I would imagine that she's on the radar at YouTube because a lot of her fans upload her music to their own visuals. Illegal or not, they just do it. And so you got to be cognizant of that's probably one of the reasons why she's got YouTube. But same deal. She's got a huge legacy catalog. She's been around for 25 years, and she's got a lot of music out there, and a lot of people really follow her in a very dedicated fashion, and that's why her plays are so high and her socials so low. Again, a legacy content thing, and I hope you're starting to see the pattern here. If you have a deep catalog, you don't need a lot of social. If you don't have anything, you need social, all right? I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? Now, just to contrast with a newer act, because I know that a lot of people are probably thinking, okay, man, enough with the legacy content stuff. What if I'm just getting started and I don't have legacy content? What do? What do I have to just hammer social? The answer is yes. Let's take a look at an EDM act that is fairly recent, just the last couple of years. You might be familiar with Johanna and Yasmin Yusuf out of Chicago with a band called Cruella. It's just a duo now. It used to be a three-piece EDM outfit, but they got rid of their DJ partner, and it's just the girls now, the sisters. And I got to tell you, they're really, really good. I'm not a huge fan of EDM, but I really like their stuff. Mostly because their production techniques are just amazing. They do a lot of really good cutting edge stuff. And also, one differentiator that I really appreciate with the Yusuf sisters is that they both sing. They both have amazing talents as vocalists, and that really kind of sets them apart. Now, look at these metrics. I don't know if it's a youth thing, maybe. I don't know, the Taylor Swift, whatever. But their metrics are super high across the board. Now, they have what we call, just like Taylor Swift, quote unquote, the ideal balance. You have a lot of people following on Facebook. They have a huge Twitter following. YouTube is redonkulous. Instagram's a little lower than I would have thought because their Instagram's actually pretty active. But I would imagine that that's probably because they're not engaging a lot with their fans. They're just, putting up pictures and saying, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing in the studio, blah, blah, blah. But they're not really hitting the comments and answering their fans back. So there's a limited engagement there that's happening. It's probably hurting their Instagram. And that is not engagement. That's a one-way conversation. Engagement means that you are responding, that you're interacting, that you're an active part of your audience and you're accessible to them. So when somebody comments and you don't comment back, your engagement drops. And then their Pandora is off the charts because they're an internet act, they're an EDM act, they probably stream quite a bit. There's probably a lot of people, frankly, that are downloading or listening to their music without, actually actively taking part in a premium tier on a streaming site or buying their stuff on iTunes. But their shows sell out, so they probably really don't give a shit. I mean, if you know anything about EDM and you know how big that market is, it's all about live connection. Very little of it has anything to do with sales. And that's the new business. That's the new music business that we live in. If you don't play live, you're kind of screwed. People use the music as a sort of a gateway drug to your entire experience, and your entire experience has to involve live. If it doesn't, you're sunk. Now let's look at established artists. People kind of know who they are, but they're not mainstream. Here's a great example. It's a terrific artist here called Goldroom. Now, Gold Room is an established stage artist almost in the perfect way. If you look across the metrics here, everything's above average, just slightly above average. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Instagram's a little on the low side, but Pandora's, about halfway between high and average. The reason why is because Gold Room has not got a lot of music out. Probably the most famous thing he's done was just last year, 2015, a song called Embrace, which is a great song, by the way. It's off an EP called, I think it's called It's Like You Never Went Away, I believe, which is one of the main lyrics in that tune. But great song. Really fabulous tune. But the guest vocalist on that song was somebody called George Maple. George Maple is a woman. She's got an incredible voice. In my opinion, probably one of the most sexy pop voices out there right now. She's collaborated with a lot of people. She's done a few things on her own as a solo act. She's been around a little bit. Not a lot, but about the same amount of time as Gold Room. But because it was a Gold Room track, he's established and she's in the promising category. Now let me show you the difference between their metrics. This is really stunning. Check this out. Huge difference. Look at that. George Maple's Facebook is massive. Her YouTube is between average and high. Her Instagram is above his. Her Pandora is actually better than his. Gold Room's actually pretty average in the face of George Maple. Even though she's a promising stage artist, she's in the same category that a lot of people who are just barely discovered, but her metrics are way bigger than his as an established artist. But the reason why his status is higher than hers is because it was his track. It was Gold Room featuring George Maple. So this gives you a really insightful sort of peek into how this works. If you don't have legacy content, you gotta be on social, right? You gotta make people aware. It's all about awareness. And if you don't get that, you're missing the whole point of the new modern music industry. If you don't get that it's about engagement and it's about awareness, it's not about streaming. Guys, it's not about streaming. It's not about how much money people aren't making in streaming. It's not about how much money you're losing by not being able to put out an album that people give a shit about. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about awareness. It's about mind share. It's about the attention graph. You got to get that through your head. You have to. You have to. If you want to be a successful musician in 2017, you got to understand that it's about awareness and not about sales. And you might ask yourself, well, how do I make a living? You make a fine living on awareness. If people know who you are and they love your stuff, and you have that ideal balance of awareness and music that's coming out on a fairly regular basis, you have it made. Don't you see it? I don't even really need to show you an undiscovered artist and what their metrics look like, because if their social is high, I mean, you can see how this is starting to, break down. If their social is high, but their content is low, then they probably either haven't released anything yet, but they just can't stop talking about it, or they have released something and didn't really go anywhere and they can't stop trying to get it to go someplace. If their legacy content is high, but their social is low, then people don't like their music and they've just kind of given up socially trying to get people to like it. So back to the consultancy stuff. The majority of my consulting work with artists boils down to this. You have to know where you stand with this stuff. You got to know where you're at. You got to understand where you are in the spectrum between undiscovered and epic. And you got to know it. You got to know. These social tools, these social platforms are more than a bullhorn. You got to know where you're at. You got to know where you're at. And if you don't know where you're at, you're already sunk.